Hello and welcome to this month's Leathercraft Masterclass Q&A session with me, Phil, where I answer all of your burning questions. So as before, I've taken some questions from Instagram stories. So if you're not on Instagram, follow me on there. Check out @Leathercraft Masterclass, turn on your notifications. So if you have any burning questions, make sure you get them into me so that I can then answer them in our Q&A sessions. Guys, don't forget to get your free leather tool guide and leather buyer's guide. All you have to do is click the link in the description below and I will email you a free guide for both those things. So today I have only 5 questions. I've taken less questions from Instagram stories and do a little bit more in the live because we're going to go live on Instagram. So I'm going to do a little bit more live Q&A. So let's go live on Instagram and see what people are asking me this month. Cool, people are joining in, that's good to see. Right, okay, so let's start with Q&A, question number 1. Okay, so question number 1 is about exotic skins, exotic leathers. And the question is about the difficulty pairing or skiving exotic leathers, probably specifically crocodile or alligator by the question being asked. Uneven surfaces make it difficult. I don't think I can swear on YouTube. Uneven surfaces make it very difficult to hold steady whilst skiving help! Exclamation mark. So good, he can't see us. Maybe you're watching this in your pajamas. Turned edge exotics, the difficulty in turning an edge is often it's very easy because you have high spots and low spots on exotic skin. It'd be ideal if I had one with me, wouldn't it really? Okay, here's an offcut that will do for now. But on this piece here, you might be able to see the texture. You've got high spots and low spots. Okay, so these lines that you see between all the tiles, they're actually low, they're little valleys, okay, and they're the low spots. And if you're not careful, you can really skive through them and sever the tiles, so you end up kind of weakening the skin itself. I think one of the biggest issues with that is not being able to get low enough with your skiving knife so that you can shave off small incremental amounts. One of the few skins really where I like to do lots of small skives rather than just one, okay? So if it's calf skin or goat skin or cowhide or that kind of thing, most of the time I skive in one go. But for exotics, I like to take just little layers and feather it off, okay? Because you really do need to watch out for when you're going past that flesh into the grain layer of the skin. So you can actually see when you're coming very close to those valleys, because there is kind of a cutoff point with exotics where if you keep skiving, you will just start cutting through, which is so easy to do on exotics. So it's one of the hardest things to do. It's very helpful if you can get off the edge of your paring stone. So we have a paring stone here. This is just a piece of granite. If you can get your skiving knife, let's get a couple of skiving knives here. That'll do. If you get a skiving knife, you've always got your fingers in the way underneath. There's only so low that you can actually get. So if you want to get even lower to take off those thin layers, you'll need to come back off the edge of the paring stone. So I'm off the edge, so my hand is not in the way. My fingers that need to hold onto the knife are not in the way, so I can get nice and low. Okay, so right now that's perfectly flat. So I can start from 0 and then lift it up to where I want to start my skive. So when it comes to exotics, skive low, skive thin, and skive often. So little bits and often is what I recommend if you're hand skiving exotics. Hi, I am watching this in my pajamas, yes. Well, why not? Why not? It's perfect for pajamas. Right, so question number 2, again, is actually about skiving knives. This is an interesting question. It says, skiving knives bevel up or bevel down, thanks. Okay, so bevel up or bevel down. Oh, we have a question here. Where can you buy exotic skin? Specifically alligator tails. I don't know where you would buy alligator tails, unfortunately. So if you're looking for small offcuts, you might want to just contact individual artisans who, if you notice that they produce a lot of leather goods, especially exotic leather goods, and they're using mostly the premium belly portion, you might be able to score some tails or heads or flanks or anything like that you want to start off with before investing in a full skin. So I'd recommend maybe just reaching out to a few different artisans and seeing if they're willing to part ways with offcuts that they might not want. Just signed up for your classes, looking forward to it. Well, perfect. I'm glad to have you join us. Welcome. And I hope you enjoy it. Please give me your feedback. Cool. All right. So back to the question, skiving knives, bevel up or bevel down. Now, I have a feeling, let me just get one, that this is the knife that this person is asking a question about. Now, they haven't said what skiving knife. They just said skiving knives, bevel up or bevel down. Bevel up is typically, you have a bevel here. You can see that we have a straight angle to this blade that goes straight down into the cutting edge. Okay, so that's a bevel where it changes angle and goes straight down. Sometimes you have one, sometimes you have two, but that's the bevel. Okay, now the person is asking, do you skive with the bevel facing up, or do you skive with the bevel facing down? Okay, so this side is completely flat. So skiving knives typically have one angle. So one side is flat, one side is angled with the bevel. If you, say for instance, try to push forwards with this knife with the bevel facing down, that would mean that you're leading with the point. And the difficulty in that is as you're doing it, it will be very, very easy for that point to dig in all of a sudden. So realistically, you can either push with this type of knife, or you can have bevel down, but you'll need to support the leather in front of you and then pull towards you on a pull skive. So push with the bevel up, pull with the bevel down for a typical skiving knife. But this type of knife is a Japanese style leather knife, usually incorrectly called a Japanese skiving knife. It's not meant for skiving alone. It's in fact a multi-use knife that you can use for cutting, trimming, skiving, all sorts of things. And a lot of people love these things. I think they're for flush cuts, trimming up linings. They're actually very, very good. I don't use it as often as my other knives, but it is very good. If you had to choose one knife, this will be a good choice. But typically you'll see people skiving with the bevel facing up or the bevel facing down. Because it's a flat top, it doesn't really make a difference whichever way around it is. You can push it forwards or pull it back. Typically, and this is just my findings, if you skive with the bevel facing down, you have to bring the handle a little bit higher up in order to get a bite into the leather. And anytime the handle is getting further and further and further away from the work surface, there's a little bit less accuracy involved, because when you skive bevel down, you keep it nice and low, you can kind of skim your fingers across the leather that you're skiving, and you get a very, very consistent angle. Okay, so that's how you get a nice, neat skive. It's all about a consistent angle, consistent cut. And when you skive bevel down, you have to lift it up. Now, are there exceptions to the rule? I'm sure there's lots of people who are very, very good at skiving bevel down that have no problems whatsoever, but this is just my findings. So typically I would recommend to keep the handle as low to the work surface as possible, and that's going to give you the most control. The downside to these style of knives is there is a limit to how low you can go before you really absolutely have to go off the edge. So it's personal preference. It depends on what you're good with. If you're very good with a Japanese style leather knife and you can skive well with it, there's no reason to change, of course. No whiskey this week. For those of you in the UK, you might be rejoicing that lockdown has come to an end. The gym is open and I went to the gym for a workout today and I've almost wiped myself out. It was either go live or have a nap. So I'm trying to be a little bit healthier, cutting down on the booze, eating healthier, trying to get more organized, using this as an opportunity. Where am I based at? I am based in the United Kingdom, in the southeast of the United Kingdom, in a place called Kent. Do you use a French edger for rolled edges? Rolled edges like turned edges? If I'm using hand tools, then sometimes I'll use a French edger, absolutely. It really depends on the leather that I'm working on. If I'm working on something like a soft kind of goat skin, it doesn't have the stiffness really for most French edges. I mean, it's possible, it's just not the ideal tool. For that, I would use a skiving knife or use the skiving machine, which is going to be the quickest and most consistent of all, of course. But yes, sometimes I use a French edger. It really depends on what I'm doing, especially if it's just like a small area, because, you know, say I'm making a bag and I'm doing a turned edge on it, then I'm going to probably, for speed, I'm going to use mostly the bell knife skiving machine. But there's always a few parts here and there that you have to finish off by hand because they're too awkward to get in, or it would be a bit risky to try and use the machine, which could end up chewing up the leather. So I do, but it depends on the leather, of course. What is your main skiving knife? Probably this one, which is one that I made, I don't know, probably about 6 months ago now. This high-speed steel. This is an English style. I made it to my design specs because I couldn't really find a knife that had exactly what I wanted out of it. Hardness, angle, edge, all that kind of thing. But I've literally, a few days ago, made this one. So this is my new skiving knife. This is an English-German hybrid. So it's an English style with the 45-degree angle there. But as you notice, there's a slight curve to the blade. This allows for more scalloped cuts, an easier time on a pull cut as well. But you can also remove material in the middle of a piece of leather, not just on the edges. Did I make it myself? Yes, I did. They're not too difficult to make, to be honest. Designs by Yom says, I'd love to try something like that. Making a skiving knife? Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I take the lazy route. I don't really have time for like heat treatments and all that kind of thing. I buy it fully hardened. High-speed steel is really forgiving for temperature. So as long as you're, removing material slowly on your belt sander or bench grinder, which is what I use, is really an unelegant solution. But as long as you keep the metal cool and it doesn't overheat, but high-speed steel is designed to stay hard at high heat, so it's probably the most forgiving to use. But 61, 62 Rockwell, so it's a very, very hard edge. And yeah, it's pretty simple. Bell knife skiver is, I hate when it does that. Bell knife skiver is a hefty investment. I've seen some YouTube videos where they use a Dremel instead. What's your thought on that? Don't do that. Not only is it a terrible mess, but you're going to need to wear new clothes afterwards, and also some kind of dust extraction along with a face mask, and not a COVID one at that. Because do remember that fine leather particles are carcinogenic, much like wood. There was actually a study done, I think it was looking at the cancer rates of Italian shoemakers. Of course, they're in amongst leather dust constantly, and they're not using any protection, and it was significantly higher. It's not to say that a little bit of leather dust is going to cause you any harm or anything like that, but any time that you're kicking up a lot of dust, and wood dust is just as bad, to be honest. You have to wear face protection, and you don't want to be breathing that in. But I would learn how to skive with a knife, which is going to be a much cleaner, elegant solution, because you're going to make so much mess with the Dremel tool. I know it's like you probably already have one, and that sounds simple and easy, but try it once, see how you go. The wooden beams look so pleasing against the red paint on the walls. Is it an old building? Yes, this building that I'm in right now, in fact, these are the original beams from the 1700s. So this building is about 300 years old. The building next to me, this is the newest one. The building next to me is from 1325. And there's one across, and it still has original foundations and a few parts that are still original. And that is from the medieval period, which is the 1100s. So yeah, in the UK, a lot of stuff's old. But yeah, it's cool. You know, this used to be a calf shed originally when it was first built, and so there was other sheds where they would have like cows, and because it's an old farm, and this is where all the calves would be. So they would separate them and put them all here. God knows why. Man, now it's full of calf leather, so comes back around. Where do you buy high-speed steel? I get it from a company in the UK, BBS, I think it is. I know a guy that works there, so he gives me small pieces. I'm not sure if you can actually buy small pieces off them, but I'm sure there's places online where you can buy hardened high-speed steel. But there's all sorts of steels that you can work with, but HSS is quite forgiving. Sorry, I'm going to scroll up again. I'm looking to buy new pricking irons. Do you have any recommendations? For brand new ones, if you're, there is a point of kind of diminishing returns when it comes to pricking irons and price. So if you're starting out, you don't need to buy the most expensive. I use mostly old vintage ones, but that's more of a romantic choice than a practical one. But Kevin Lee makes some really good pricking irons. I did a review recently. He sent me some to review. They were very good. So he does some that are kind of high end and some are a little bit less expensive. Wooter Leather is another one. Amy Roke, but that price is getting up there. So is KS Blade Punch, but that's a little bit more expensive. But you can't really go wrong with Kevin Lee or Wooter, to be honest. So those would be my recommendations, unless you really want to invest on it. If you want to go traditional and you kind of use more all work, then probably Blanchard or maybe some vintage Dixons, but don't buy all of them because I'm trying to buy them. Right, so the last question. I don't think I can scroll up anymore. There's probably like 15 questions I can't get to. Crimson Hides. I haven't actually used their pricking irons. I've used their pipe awl, which I like, but I haven't used their pricking irons. So you probably want to ask someone who has used the Crimson Hides. But I think he comes out with what he calls a French style now, which is that flat bottom pricking iron that you're probably familiar with. But he's probably most well known for that oval style with that comes down to a point. That basically a set of awl blades. Ever tried Abbey England's pricking irons? Picked some up a while ago. I must say they work great compared to my cheap Japanese ones. I take it they're Japanese stitching chisels. It depends, because some of their pricking irons are Chinese made. I think some of them are actually Kevin Lee. Some of them are your AliExpress specials, and then there's some that are made by an ex-Dixon's employee in the UK. So there's a variety of different ones. I don't think Abbey England actually makes them in their foundry themselves. So I think they have quite a few different ones now. Tips and tricks for glamour shots on products. Okay, this was like part of a multi-part question, but I kept the last one. So tips and tricks on glamour shots on products. So this is a photography-based question. I don't get too many questions about photography, to be honest. But some people do like my photography. It depends on whether you think it's good or not. But I would say, in answer to that question, probably the number one thing you should learn about photography, if you want to take a good shot, there's two things. Number one is probably lighting. It's the most important thing to get to grips with, is lighting, because where your lights are positioned in a photograph can make something look terrible or amazing. And the difference is just where your light is coming from, whether that be natural light, whether that be photography lights, or just the light in your room. Lighting is so important. And number two is what you're trying to say with your image. Now you might be thinking, it's just a photograph of a product or something, but it's always a good idea to think about your photography in the sense of what are you trying to communicate? What are you trying to say? What do you want the person to see? What do you want them to focus on? And questions like that. And then you can start making a photograph rather than just taking a photograph. So you think about what you want to photograph, the conversation that you want to have with the person who's looking at the photograph, and then start with there rather than just go, hey, here's something, and then is it in focus? Yes, click, done. Okay, that's just standard eBay photography. But if you could think about a little bit about what you want to say with a photograph, then it communicates a lot better than just taking a photograph. An example would be, if you look at, my handle. Okay, so the last photograph on my Instagram timeline is a picture of a handle. It's the latest release. The course that I produced was the making of a post handle, okay, which is a handle that goes on top of a framed briefcase, like a Gladstone bag, attaché, things like that. In that photograph, you'll notice, going from memory here, that the focus of it is the shape, the silhouette of the handle and the glossy edges, okay? So people like to see glossy edges because I'm also explaining in the course how to do that. So I want them to take notice of that and see that. So I've angled it so that the edges are catching the light, but the light is also contouring the side of the handle, which gives you a sense of shape rather than just looking at something face on. It's side on and the light is kind of showing you how it's shaped and sculpted. So it's giving you a little bit of information about the handle. You also notice that the handle is taken on this work surface here, which is covered in cuts and marks and glue and all sorts of things. So you've got something that's rough and coarse and industrial. And the idea is it's contrast between something that is beautiful and elegant and full of color. Because the only thing in the shot that's got color is the handle. Everything else is actually black and white, so that your attention is focused on there. But the communication doesn't just stop at that, because in the background, which you may or may not be able to see, it's not fully out of focus, but it's not in focus. There's a lock, there's a doming tool, there are several pieces of metal, there are rivets, and it's subliminally giving people an idea of what the next course might be for what the handle might go on. So it's also hinting at what's coming up for those who are pretty sharp. So it's not just place the handle on there, take a photograph, upload it to Instagram. You have to really think about what you want to say with it, what you want to communicate, what their focus should be, and what information the person looking at it should get. But as for what camera, what lenses, and things like that, I'm really actually not into the hardware side of photography. It's not really my thing. It's not a boring subject, but it won't hold my interest for very long. I've done like an online course about photography back in the day to learn the basics of it. But I'm not the kind of person to take the best photography advice from. All right, so we have an Instagram question here. Do you prefer dye and burnish or use edge paint or Vegetan leather? It really depends. It really does depend. There are no absolute answers, but generally speaking, edge paint is designed for chrome tan leather, but it can be used very successfully on Vegetan leather. If you're using a pigmented Vegetan, which is something that's completely pigmented, there's no variation in color or anything like that, it's just kind of monotone color all the way across, then edge paint works a little bit better. If you have something that's very natural looking and you have that color variation, maybe it's just a dye. You've got that depth of color, you've got a little bit of growth rings in there, you've got something that has a little bit of story to it and all that kind of thing. If you put edge paint on that, it can kind of ruin the look a little bit because it just doesn't fit with that natural looking leather and then just like a monotone color on the outside. And in that case, a burnish can it gels well with that natural look. But if you have a Vegetan that's completely pigmented one color all the way across, like most chrome tan leather is, then it kind of works well to have something that's a uniform color on the edges too. So again, it comes down to a personal preference and design. There's nothing wrong with using edge paint on Vegetan or burnishing. So that's just my thoughts on it. But if you've got something natural looking, keep the edges natural. If you've got something that's more kind of monotone, then keep it monotone. But consistency, it makes up for a lot in design. Cool, right, so let's move on. So we've done the photography bit, lighting and story, the two things that I find the most important. So question number 4, the tips come afterwards. Your designs are superb, thank you very much. Did you initially have this gift or has it progressed with experience? Well, I guess it's quite subjective. Some people might like my designs, some people might not like my designs, so it really depends. Did I have a knack for designing or creating or constructing? I wouldn't say that, you can't be completely devoid of a natural ability to design or create. I guess it's a calling that if you're naturally inclined to be good at something, you kind of fall into an occupation sometimes. So it chooses you in that sense, I guess. But you notice a big difference of when you first start out and you're designing and creating and things like that. Obviously, there is a progression where you improve over a period of time. So did I initially start out being good at design, as this person reckons that I am? You have a predisposition for it, I guess, but it's something that you hone over time through hard work and persistence. So that's how I would answer that question. What's your burnishing method for Vegetan? Probably not something I could explain with my voice without actually giving you a full demonstration, guys. So anything that requires anything like that, usually you're going to find it in the course, of course, which there is, Techniques of the Edge Part 1. How many years you work with leather? 12 or 13 years now, I think. Something like that, yeah. Have you ever tried Turkish Vegetan that is Epiphany leather? I have not. Have I ever tried Iranian leather? I doubt they would sell Iranian leather outside. I don't think they export or import for that matter. I think that would be disallowed. I thought you guys couldn't get Instagram. Apparently you can. Or maybe that's China. I don't know. I thought it was Iran too. Okay, so last question. Okay, last question. You guys are free to ask more, of course. When did you have the epiphany to teach fine leathercraft? Well, when did I have the idea to actually just teach leathercraft? It was someone local to my town who found out that I made leather goods, and he contacted me and said, can you show me how it's done, all that kind of thing. I really wasn't interested, to be honest, because I was busy. I had a lot to do. I said, oh no, I'm busy, and he kept pestering me, and it's like probably a couple of weeks went by. Eventually I relented and I thought, okay, I'm going to figure out how much it would cost me to take an afternoon off, because if I'm not getting orders done, I'm losing money. So to make it worth my while, he's got to pay for what I'm going to be losing. And so I gave him a number that was pretty high, hoping that he'd be put off by that, and he wasn't. And he was like, can I come round tomorrow? So I was like, okay, sure. So he came round and we did some sessions together, and the rest, as they say, is history. So that's kind of where it started from. I was thinking about this the other day, I can't remember the time where I decided, let's take this online, let's do this online, and let's like record doing, you know, the techniques of hand stitching, the techniques of adhesion, techniques of the edge, and all the kind of techniques of the blade and all the early courses. I can't remember when I actually first decided to do it online, which is, I can remember everything else, but I can't remember that, and I don't know why. It's really strange, but yeah. But it just naturally progressed to doing online courses a few months after that. I think it was maybe a year after that. I have a bunch of dull punches that I prefer to keep using. Could you provide some tips on sharpening tools and possibly provide a course on sharpening various tools? Well, techniques of the blade is obviously teaching you how to sharpen skiving knives and how to sharpen leather knives. Right, I'm going to do a quick scroll up to see if there's any questions that I missed. Cinnabrooks, KS or Crimson, which do you prefer and why? I haven't used any, I've used KS, didn't like them. Cinnabrooks is a copy of that with a few minor variations, I believe, but I haven't tried it, so it might be very good, but it's kind of a copy, which I don't like. Crimson, typically they're the oval shape. I prefer a flat bricking iron because I hand stitch with an awl more often, much more often. Yeah, so I think that answers none of them is what I prefer. Do you usually host workshops? No, I don't do in-person courses anymore. Back in the day, before I had this place, I didn't really have the facility to do it in properly. Like like I needed a bigger workshop. It's I'm not that. I don't mind doing them if like I really kind of gel with the individual doing it and they have a real passion for it. But I'd have to know them pretty well to do it now, I think. But yeah, I mean, I did it for quite some time. And, you know, sometimes you get some really great people that really interested and like they absorb the information. And then some people, they're just kind of like, they just want to do something different for the day and they're not really bothered. And it's really a real challenge to teach someone who's kind of not really into it. They're just doing it for a bit of fun. So what is the next video you're planning to work on? Generally speaking, I come out with the title of the video, the information about the video, about a week before the actual course release itself. The reason it's done that way is if there's anything that comes up, if there's anything that, you know, say for instance, the machine breaks, or, you know, some leather that's supposed to come through or hardware that's supposed to come through doesn't come through, I can then switch it with a backup course. I think I've only ever done that once, but it's kind of a good idea if you start in a month going, oh, this is going to be it, and then the time comes and a disaster happens, which did once, then you can kind of quickly switch. But if everyone's expecting one thing and then you deliver something completely different, so a week before is kind of like the earliest that I like to say this is what the next course is going to be, and that way I can kind of guarantee that that's exactly what people are going to get. I was going to try and make a wallet using Automotive leather, which is softer than Vegetan. What can you suggest to use between the layers to stiffen the leather? Some sort of backing maybe? I'm going to be honest with you, I wouldn't use Automotive or upholstery leather for any kind of work in leathercraft. Generally, it's a very loose, soft grain, which is going to be, scratch that, which is going to be the most challenging to work with. So it's a heavy pigment on it, designed to take a lot of wear. So generally speaking, it also needs to be stretched out around a form, and that's what it's designed for. So when you start making a wallet out of it, You're going to find it's very stretchy, it creases very easily. The grain is very loose, which is going to make it more difficult to stitch, more difficult to cut, more difficult to skive. It's really kind of flogging a dead horse, you know, what can we stiffen it up with and all that kind of thing. I mean, I'm sure there is a grade of upholstery leather or automotive leather out there that would actually work for it, but I'm talking about in general. It's usually a lower grade as well because it's sprayed with pigments and sprayed with color. They can use any old hide they want. It really doesn't matter. They buff the surface off, give it a new finish, print out a new finish onto it to give it that leather grain look. But it's not something I would recommend at all. I would avoid that. Do you use pattern paper or card for your patterns? I use craft card, not C-R-A-F-T, K-R-A-F-T, craft card. It's kind of like a very stiff, brown, thick card. So it folds very well, very, very strong, holds its dimensions quite nicely. You can get it at stationery shops, eBay, lots of different places. Sometimes it's made from recycled card as well. Hello from Chile. Cool. Well, thank you guys for tuning in and watching this live with me and all your juicy questions about leathercraft. Don't forget to get your questions in next month, okay? So it's usually the day before I go live every month on this day. I take all the questions on Instagram stories, so make sure you have your Instagram notifications on. So when I come up in stories saying what questions do you have, if you ask a question through the Q&A, you've a higher probability of getting it answered than doing it in the live, though I do as many live answers as possible. But thank you for joining me. Don't forget, on YouTube, this video will be up. So right now, this is being recorded on my main camera. So if you want to watch this again or you want to watch it back, then you can go on YouTube. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications on there because I put a lot of video content on there that's not on Instagram. In fact, I just put a video up on YouTube that's not on Instagram. So make sure you follow me on both platforms simultaneously. Well, thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you in the next video. Take care, guys, and have a wonderful rest of your day.